So roll call, trustee Muncy. Oh, did you have a question? Yeah, oh, aye, aye. Trustee Boatner,
Aye.
trustee McKelvey.
Aye.
And trustee Williams.
Aye.
And trustee.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. 6B, motion to approve Resolution 25-04 to enter into an engineering contract for construction observation of the 2025 KCOM STP projects. And Scott, do you want to say a few words about that? Thank you, Kim.
The contract before you is for the upcoming roadway project. What you have is,
I don't, I'm sorry, Scott, I don't think it's working. Doesn't sound like it to me. All right, okay.
Or move James's over a little bit and speak there. Just pick it up and. hold it.
Yeah,
okay. So what you have
That's
is the
better.
contract for oversight of this year's construction project. A very important part of this is a lot of this project is federally funded, and the documentation, oversight, et cetera, in order to recapture those funds is a necessary part of this. I would add that approximately 15% of this contract will be reimbursed to the village by the highway district, because 3 of the 4 roadways have shared jurisdiction. That actual percentage is built into a separate agreement that we'll cover under discussion later this evening. But a percentage of that will be coming back to the village. And then lastly, for your budgeting consideration, this work will not be starting until after May 1. So there'd be no impact of the fiscal year that you're in currently. It would start in the upcoming fiscal year. And because of the way these projects work, you can estimate that about 80% of the contract would be due in this first fiscal year. And then because you don't receive the final invoices and such, the project with IDOT actually will continue out for a couple of years. In general, really, but can plan for 80% of the cost in the current budget year and the balance in the following year. Just helps to spread the dollars out a little bit. So with that, any questions?
And some of that's really just a function of how IDOT eventually sends us the invoice too. It's delayed.
And then the services we have to provide to address questions and such that come up over time.
Okay, trustee Burson?
The 15% that is credited back from the highway department, how does that align with this 80% and 20% that you mentioned? So if you start out with 100% of a pie, how does that actually divvy up?
I could have explained that a little bit clearer. Of the total contract amount, about 15% of it comes back from the highway district.
Right?
What you'll typically do during the course of the contract is there'll be invoices submitted every month or so.
Right.
You can choose to seek reimbursement every month. In practicality, that's a lot of work for that reimbursement. You may choose to seek reimbursement every 3 or 4 months. So the timing of it will come somewhat this fiscal year and somewhat the following fiscal year.
Okay, and so what I'm trying to get a handle on is the total amount that the village is going to be responsible for as our portion of those grants in the first year that we're going to struggle with, because the second year not so much, right? So the first year where we have the approximately 80% or so, that's 80% of 85% of the total, because 15% is credited from the highway department, is that right?
The village will pay the invoices, outlay the funds, and then receive reimbursement from the highway district.
And we're going to,
periodically.
later, not tonight, have an agreement with the highway department as part of what IDOT requires on the cost share, I think,
Correct.
as well. That's not directly ready tonight, but it'll be forthcoming.
Correct, that is correct.
So what's the approximate total number of the village's share of these grants?
About 85% of this contract amount.
Which, are you looking for the
Not-
engineering estimate for the road project?
No, what I'm trying to get at is, we have effectively a large lump sum payment, however, whether it's in 2 or 3 or however many payments. So we have a large payment in the next fiscal year for our share of these grants. We got the grants, it's a great thing, nobody's complaining about it, but we have our share, and our share is substantial. And so I'm trying to figure out, when you shave off the highway department part, if that shaves off in the first year, and if you shave off the 20%, how much do you have to come up with in that first year of this total amount?
Of this contract, about 80%. And this is billed to the village monthly for the engineering services. So the
So
dollar
I apologize, I'm not made my question clear, and I don't have any current concerns or questions about your engineering contract
Okay.
For observation of the roads. I was really trying to get at more in the apportionment of the grant money and any money that we might be, sharing or benefiting from the highway department. What, at the end of the day, are we going to have built into our budget in this coming fiscal year?
Actually,
for
Scott, I
our
think
share
she's
of the
getting at
grants?
is what we've talked about. What we will spend for Danker, Brown, and
Right,
the
the
dollars, if it's an estimated 1.1 or 1.2, how much of that,
Because
80% of that contract will be in this, which will be the 25-26 budget, and how much will fall then the following year, of that, say it was round numbers of $1 million.
And then further, am I understanding, is this 15% with the highway department, is that strictly for your engineering services under this observation program, or is this part of the whole grant?
It's also part of the construction cost itself.
Right, okay. So we
So-
started at 1.2 million, which is a big scary number, right? And we take 80% of that, which is our share, right? Now then, do we get to then somewhere in here take out this other 15%?
Yes.
So,
That'll still be split between you 2 years, right? I mean,
the 15%, maybe it's 10 and 5, I don't, that would be interesting to know too, but if we know that 30%, or 35% is not due in that first year, then it's an easier pill to swallow.
And we're getting some of the questions you're asking actually relate to the joint funding agreement for discussion later, but I'll cover them now.
My apologies.
No, that's totally fine, because it gets confusing, because one of the invoices, the village pays directly. The other one, IDOT pays the contractor, the village then reimburses IDOT. So round figures, the current estimated cost of the construction project is $3.5 million. Of that, $2.7 million is grant funding. Keep in mind, that's funding that the village never actually receives. It goes through IDOT's hands and it reduces what the village owes. If that total contract were completed in 2025 at the $3.5 million cost, and again, that's an estimate, we don't know until bids are open what the exact figure is, it's likely the state would invoice the village only for about 80% of that in the year of construction. So 80% of $3.5 million, what, $2.8 million? They would then ask the village to reimburse your 25% of the cost. So you would probably owe the state in the range of, if they build that full amount, $500,000 to $600,000. And I'll work with the administrator and finance to firm those numbers up to get rolled into the budget process.
But past history, the way IDOT works, you're gonna be in the 20, I think you're gonna be, the biggest amount will be in the 26, 27 budget year, not this future budget that you'll be approving in April. That'll be essentially the 25, 26 budget year. The 25, 26, I don't believe, if past is a predictor of future with IDOT, you get the bulk of the money billed to you 12 to 24 months after the fact.
Which has happened and does happen, but you do actually have to have the funds budgeted in 25, 26, should they happen to submit the invoice
Yep.
on time.
And we'll carry it,
Right.
we'll budget correctly for the 25, 26, and then carry it as a cost, because it wasn't billed, into the 26, 27, with, again, a higher amount for the balance in that 26, 27. But it could be in the summer of 27, which will be a third budget year, that you'll actually disperse the money. But it'll be on our audit trail, as Scott's saying, starting this upcoming budget year.
Well, we can hope. And to your point, since you've been here, I believe this board approved warrant for the Bolcom Roundabout, which was completed, what, 4 years ago, or, something like that? The final payment on it.
Bolcom is fully paid.
Right.
Anderson Road from 2022 is not yet fully paid. You're still carrying an obligation for reimbursement for that, because the state hasn't submitted the final invoice yet.
So the same type of thing
Exactly.
could happen.
In the report, you'll see in the audit, we've got a past liability that just keeps going forward until it's paid. So it's a claim on, and that's why you have your fund balance be unencumbered versus encumbered. So say the 5 million isn't as good as you think it is because a certain number of that's encumbered for past road projects, for instance. When we get to the audit report, we'll get into details. It's not really germane to this item on the action, but it is germane to how you started the meeting about giving a full disclosure of budget costs, current and future.
Correct.
Okay, anybody else? Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I move I move motion to approve Resolution 2504 to enter into an engineering contract for construction observation of the 2025 KCOM STP projects.
Second.
Okay, second by trustee Burson, and roll call.
Trustee Muncy.
Aye.
Trustee Boatner.
Aye.
Trustee McAlvey.
Aye.
Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Trustee Burson.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, moving on to 7, discussion items.
Scott.
Campton, I'm sorry? Oh,
Yeah, just go, I'm sorry.
oh, okay. Campton Township Open Space Referendum. I was going to talk tonight a little bit about the proposed referendum for the April 1st ballot election for Campton Township Open Space, but I'm going to wait till our next meeting. And it'll be a little closer to election time. 7B, design engineering contract with HR Green to secure funding for the 2026 road construction projects. Hey, Scott.
Okay, thank you. So this is an opportunity for the village to think about, given the discussions about budget and constraints in the current fiscal year. I'll explain this and then make a suggestion to maybe defer it a little bit. The village has also received grant funding for Campton Hills Road from Town Hall Road to LaFox Road. And that is guaranteed funding. That is $750,000 towards the construction of that roadway. It is currently in the program for 2029 construction funding. That road's in pretty rough shape. So we've talked to KCOM to see if engineering were completed early, if they could advance funds to have the roadway construction done at a year earlier. They always have to balance their budget, but there's always projects that get deferred and such. So if a project is ready, they can move it forward in a construction year. So best case, if the village did advance, if you didn't do anything and waited till 2029 construction, this contract wouldn't be for you until 2028. Given the condition of the roadway, to think about if you want to advance that, to have that work done earlier, as early as 2026, we would have to start working on the engineering for it this year. Given the discussion I heard about budget constraints, you may want to think about if this is something you want to do to advance it to an earlier year, wait till May 1. You're in the next fiscal budget year for any expenditures for design engineering. But it's a decision, it's an opportunity for the village to move that funding forward to get that roadway done earlier. I don't know what it's going to look like in 2029.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason we bring this forward for discussion.
So in a way, this is like that bypass KDOT work in conjunction that we talked about and had some back and forth about whether we should or shouldn't pre-engineer to be eligible, and that we did on these roads that we're gonna spend 3.5 million on, instead of the full 4.x dollars that it would cost if we didn't have the 80/20. So it's a similar to that, Trustee Boatner, and I think we'll hear from Scott and then talking to Trustee Millet, who sits on his day job on that committee, and maybe discuss it a little bit more as part of the next year's budget, and then bring it back fully. So this just bringing you aware of it. We're not necessarily asking to move it forward for next 2 weeks from now, but just to give it some consideration in the budget.
That is exactly it, is to get it into your minds, especially with the upcoming budget process.
Go ahead, Nick.
Thanks. Question about that. So it's a $750,000 grant. I don't know exactly how long that section of roadway is, but what do you anticipate the overall cost for that project? Is it similar to what we're doing? I mean, we're looking at like a $1.2 million reconstruction?
1 point change, I don't know the exact. I think
1 point
I
low?
think the construction is estimated at just over 1.0 million. The grant constraints are, for this type of work, maximum 75% of cost, capped at $750,000. And I think our estimate was 1.04 million, so we're capped at 750,000, like 74%.
Sure, go ahead, Tom.
The budget for the engineering would be ish? I mean, what are we talking here?
Phase 1 and Phase 2 engineering is somewhere just under 70,000. We're still finalizing the contract language and proposal. Want to at least have enough numbers to be able to talk to you about, to give you an idea, again, to figure into, your budget cycle.
Okay. Nick?
One last quick thing. That
Okay.
engineering, though, that's part of that 1.04 million reconstruction cost? The
Actually, no,
70,000.
the 1.04 is the construction cost,
Okay, that's not including phase 1, 2, and 3 engineering?
including Phase 1, 2, and 3. It's approximately 1.2 total.
1.2 total.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to move on? All righty. Moving on to 7C, intergovernmental agreement between the village and the Campton Township Highway District to share responsibilities and share funding expenses of the 2025 KCOM STP projects.
Okay. And we've covered a little bit of that in the earlier discussion. Given the size of these contract scope agreements and such, we wanted to bring it to you, preliminary information, rather than, hey, here's an agreement to sign it, to make sure we can answer any of your questions. But that agreement lays out the percentages for each roadway that the highway district pays for and the village pays for, both engineering and construction. And then also that the village is responsible for the full contract with IDOT, and then you seek reimbursement from the highway district as the project progresses.
And I think your exhibit's labeled 7C kind of lays out those different roads percentages and gives you numbers. But that's saying, let's just move that forward, move that process with the highway district to get confirmation, and we'll bring that forward at 2 weeks. If we're completed with the highway district, it'll come forward to you for approval.
We did complete the draft of it that I submitted to the highway district and to Mark actually this morning. And I've already talked with the highway district about it. They're taking a look at the language. It is an agreement that IDOT requires us to have in place prior to this project going out for bidding because of the shared responsibilities between the two agencies.
And the difference, this and Anderson, the highway district was lead, so they had a cost sharing with us for our smaller percentage of Anderson. So this time it's changed because, as you see in that exhibit, we are the higher percentage on each of the 4 roads. And as we discussed, Nick, Danker's 100% example.
Right. So it's one of the required agreements. We think we'd have it ready for your, consideration meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, ready to move on?
Consensus to move it.
Okay. All right, 7D, funding commitment agreement with IDOT for the 2025 KCOM/STP projects.
There is a lot of paperwork involved with a federally funded project.
Yeah.
This is an agreement that the village will have to enter into with IDOT for confirming your share of the overall project. And when I refer to your share, it's yours and the highway district combined. The agreement we just talked about allows you reimbursement from the highway district. So this is, you're committing funding towards this project. It explains how the village is billed by IDOT for reimbursement for this project. And one thing that actually accompanies this also is the village is going to be using some motor fuel tax funding for the construction cost of that project. So there's also a MFT resolution that would accompany this, allocating those funds for the construction cost as well.
Okay,
Okay, so again, additional paperwork required by this type of contract.
all right, any comments or questions? Welcome, Mike.
And they voted, Trustee Millette, that you'll check all the engineers' estimates and numbers for shares.
Perfect timing. All right,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Scott. So moving on to 8, additional items from the president, trustees, or attorney. Anything? Okay. Motion to move into closed session. Motion that the village board enter closed session as permitted by the Open Meetings Act to discuss one or more of the following matters: appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees or contractors, and pending probable or imminent litigation. And next, I will say that, do I need a motion for 10? No.
You will. That we will
Yeah.
not return from executive session because there will not be an action item to vote
Yeah.
on. So that way the public knows
Y-
that there's no reason to
There's
stay.
no action afterwards.
Yeah.
So,
So moved, Muncy.
okay. A second by Williams. And roll call?
Trustee Muncy,
Aye.
Trustee Boatner,
Aye.
Trustee McKelvey,
Aye.
and Trustee Williams,
Aye.
and Trustee
Okay.
Burson,
Hi.
and Trustee Millette.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you all. I don't know.
I think it's easier to go in the back, because it's a sensitive
Maybe we're better. Uh-huh. No phone calls? have such luck.
No.